A quiet private jet cruises high above the clouds. The hum of the engines is the only sound breaking the silence inside the cabin. The luxury seats are filled with passengers relaxing and sipping their drinks, some chatting quietly, others lost in their own thoughts. The flight attendants move gracefully down the aisle, their smiles polite and professional. But one stands out from the rest, a young woman with sharp features and a confident air about her. She's used to this world of privilege and power, where everyone around her seems to belong. But today she watches a man enter the cabin. He is out of place. His faded uniform and worn shoes speak of a life lived in service. He's the janitor on this private jet. But he doesn't belong in the world the passengers occupy. He moves quietly down the aisle, his mop and bucket in hand. And as he begins to clean a small spill near the window, most of the passengers don't even notice him. The flight attendant does, though. And as her gaze locks onto him, a thought crosses her mind. A thought she can't resist. This man doesn't fit in, not here, not among people who are important, not among people who matter, not like her, not like anyone on this jet. She watches him closely as he works his way down the aisle, carefully wiping down the tray tables. With a sense of quiet dignity, she can't help but feel the slightest flicker of disdain for him. Who does he think he is walking through their space? As if he belongs here, a place where the rich and powerful reside, a place where people like him are meant to stay hidden from view. It's not just his appearance, it's the way he moves, the way he doesn't seem to belong at all. And as she watches him work, she forms a plan to remind him of his place, a plan to show everyone that this man is nothing more than an invisible worker, someone who exists only to serve and to clean after the messes of others. The passengers are oblivious to the tension that's beginning to build in the air. A few glance his way and then quickly look away as if embarrassed by his presence. But no one says anything, no one challenges the situation, no one seems to notice how uncomfortable it makes the air in the cabin feel colder, somehow less welcoming. The flight attendant knows she has an opportunity here, and she's not going to waste it. As the janitor moves closer to the back of the plane, she steps out from the galley, a forced smile plastered on her face. She approaches him with an air of false politeness, and her words are clipped as she addresses him in a tone that only someone used to being in charge would use. "Could you clean that up over there, please?" She gestures to a small spill near the window. The janitor pauses for a brief moment, his eyes flicking up to meet hers. But he says nothing, he simply nods and begins walking toward the spill. She watches him carefully, her smile still in place. But something shifts in her eyes, a silent judgment, something that makes the air between them feel thick and charged. She watches him kneel to clean the spill, and that's when it happens. She can feel it, the moment where her plan begins to unfold in her mind, as she steps back and watches him from a distance, knowing that the next few moments will be a reminder of just how small he is in her world and how easily he can be made to feel it. The janitor moves with slow, deliberate steps toward the small spill by the window. His hands tremble slightly as he kneels to clean it up with quiet precision. The flight attendant watches from the galley, her eyes narrowing as she studies him, her smile now replaced by a look of quiet contempt. She can't help but feel disgusted by his presence here, a man like him in a place like this. She had been in this world for so long, surrounded by wealth and power, and he had no right to be here. He should have been in the back doing his job in the shadows, where people like him belong. She shifts her weight and steps forward, her heels clicking against the floor like a clock counting down to something inevitable. The passengers don't seem to notice the tension building in the air. They're too absorbed in their own conversations, or staring out of the windows at the endless expanse of clouds below. But she sees it. She sees the janitor's back hunched slightly as he works, and her mind begins to race with ideas, how to make him feel it, to make him understand that he is nothing more than an invisible figure in their world. He continues to clean silently, unaware of the judgment in her eyes as the flight attendant watches from a distance. She knows what she has to do. She has to remind him that he doesn't belong in this space, not among these passengers, not among people like her. She waits for the perfect moment. And then as he finishes with the spill, she walks toward him again, her voice cool and controlled with just the right amount of sharpness. "You missed a spot," she says loud enough for the nearest passengers to hear. She can feel the eyes of a few of them darting over to the janitor, and then quickly looking away, trying to pretend they haven't noticed the awkward scene unfolding before them. The janitor pauses for a brief moment, his eyes flicking up to meet hers. But he doesn't respond. He simply moves back to finish the job, his face betraying no emotion. The flight attendant smiles to herself, her plan unfolding just as she had imagined it. But there's a strange feeling creeping in the longer she watches him work. She had expected him to get flustered, to become embarrassed, or to say something, but instead he moves with a quiet grace. It's almost as if he's done this 1,000 times before, as if he's learned how to ignore the cruelty of people like her over the years. She doesn't know why, but something about that makes her uneasy. She shakes the thought away quickly. She's in control here, not him. As he finishes with the last bit of cleaning, he stands up slowly and wipes his hands on his pants. She watches his movements closely. He doesn't seem to care that she's watching him, not even a glance in her direction. Instead, he quietly goes about his work in a way that makes her feel small for just a moment. And then she catches herself. No, she wouldn't let this man make her feel anything. She wasn't going to let him make her feel guilty for what she was doing, not when she was simply following the rules of the world. She had always known the world, where people like him cleaned and served, and kept quiet in the shadows. And then it happens as she prepares to leave the galley to speak to him once more, to remind him where he belongs. She hears a voice, soft but firm, from the front of the cabin, a voice that sends a shiver down her spine. The janitor walks away from the clean spill. Without a word, his steps steady and his eyes fixed forward, but something in the air has changed. The tension lingers like a fog around the cabin. And though no one speaks loudly, the energy in the room is shifting. A couple sitting near the front leans in, whispering to each other, their eyes flicking toward the janitor, and then quickly looking away as if afraid to be caught staring. An older gentleman across the aisle watches with mild curiosity, his brow furrowed, as if he is trying to understand what just happened, but saying nothing. The flight attendant notices all of it, every glance, every whispered exchange, and instead of feeling regret or hesitation, she feels something else, something more satisfying. She believes she's doing the right thing, keeping order, maintaining standards, preserving the atmosphere of elegance these passengers expect. She moves through the aisles, slowly checking seatbelts and drink trays, but her eyes are always drifting back to the man in the warm uniform. The janitor kneels again, this time near the back of the cabin, to wipe the base of a cabinet where someone had left a shoe print. He works with care. Even as he feels the eyes on him, he has been through worse, much worse. And yet something about this moment feels heavier. It is not the ridicule that bothers him. It is the silence, the way no one stands up, the way everyone pretends not to see what is happening. A young woman sitting near the emergency exit lowers her phone and looks toward him. She watches for a long moment before glancing up at the flight attendant, and then quickly looking back down, unsure of what to do. The janitor continues cleaning, slow, methodical movements, like a man who is used to being ignored, used to being judged, used to being invisible. Near the galley, the flight attendant leans casually against the wall, sipping a glass of water, her expression calm, but inside she is alert, watching every reaction, measuring every glance, waiting for someone to validate what she is doing. But no one does, not yet. Still, she tells herself, it is only a matter of time. She believes people are thinking exactly what she is thinking. They just don't have the courage to say it out loud. The cabin grows quieter as the plane continues its descent. Clouds brushing past the windows like whispers of a storm waiting to break. The hum of the engines now feels louder, more intrusive, like a reminder that something is building beneath the surface. The janitor places the cleaning cloth back into his small cart and begins to roll it toward the service area unaware that just ahead near the cockpit someone has been watching everything from behind a partially opened door. He stops for a moment, adjusts a small strap on the cart, then continues walking slowly with the same calm presence that had defined him since he first entered the cabin. The passengers avoid his gaze, but their curiosity is rising, each of them wondering in silence who this man really is and why something about him feels different. Then a voice crackles softly from the intercom, not the usual announcement, not the expected landing update, but a short message directed only to the flight attendant, her name spoken clearly, her presence requested at the front of the aircraft. Immediately she freezes, her hand tightening around the edge of the counter, the calm in her eyes faltering for the first time. The flight attendant stands frozen for a moment, her name still echoing in her mind. From the intercom, the tone of the message was not harsh, but it carried weight, the kind of weight that comes from someone who commands respect. Without needing to raise their voice, she glances toward the front of the plane, the cockpit door now slightly ajar, as if someone has been watching from behind it. All along the passengers do not notice the message, or maybe they pretend not to. Her steps are slow as she begins moving forward, her mind trying to make sense of what the captain might want. As she approaches the cockpit, the janitor quietly pushes his cart into the service area, his head slightly bowed, his hands steady and calm. But behind that calm is a storm of thoughts, memories of days when he had to swallow his pride and keep working even when people looked through him like glass, even when they treated him like background noise. But this moment feels different. He feels something stirring in the air, something familiar, but long forgotten, something like justice. The pilot steps out just as the flight attendant reaches the front of the cabin. He is tall, with a calm presence and eyes that have seen thousands of hours in the sky, eyes that have also seen people make assumptions based on appearances. He looks at her for a long second, saying nothing at first, then gestures quietly toward the cockpit door. She follows without a word. Passengers near the front notice, but say nothing. A few exchange curious glances, but the silence remains heavy like fog before a storm. Inside the cockpit, the door closes gently behind them. The captain stands near the window, looking out over the clouds, before finally turning to face her. His voice is calm, but there is a sharpness to it, like a pilot who knows turbulence is coming and has already adjusted for it. He asks her softly if everything in the cabin is fine. She nods quickly, professionally, but he doesn't react. Instead, he asks another question. What did you say to him, the janitor? She blinks, caught off guard, and stumbles over her words, saying only that she was managing order, keeping appearances, making sure the space looked professional. The captain studies her in silence, then steps closer, his voice now firmer, not angry, but direct. He tells her that the man she humiliated is not just a janitor, not just some cleaner. He is the same man who once prevented a major mechanical failure on an international flight, saving hundreds of lives. He was offered retirement, but chose instead to stay on, quietly working behind the scenes, helping people even if they never knew it. The flight attendant feels her throat tighten, her face pale. As the words sink in, the room feels smaller, the air heavier. She remembers the way he had cleaned the floor with such care, how he never once raised his voice, never looked shaken, never asked for recognition. And now she realizes why, because he didn't need any of that, because he already knew who he was. Outside the cockpit, the passengers continue to sit unaware of the conversation unfolding behind the door. But something is about to change, something that will shift the entire mood of the cabin, something that will force everyone to see the man they overlooked in a new light. The flight attendant stands still inside the cockpit, the weight of the pilot's words pressing down on her like altitude sickness. A soft hum fills the silence from the instruments on the control panel, but her thoughts are louder than any engine. She stares at the floor, unable to look him in the eye, remembering every word she had said to the janitor, every cold look, every dismissive order. And now each one lands in her chest, like small stones building into something heavier, something harder to carry. The pilot does not raise his voice, he does not need to. His tone is calm, steady. But his eyes are sharp. He reminds her that respect is not given based on uniforms or titles or positions on a plane, that every person here plays a role, and sometimes the most important roles are the ones people never see. The janitor, he says, is not just part of the crew. He is part of the soul of the aircraft. And the only reason many flights like this one run smoothly and safely is because of men like him who do their work quietly, who carry knowledge, experience, and pride in every movement. She nods slowly, ashamed of her actions, but not yet understanding the full depth of what she has done. The pilot places a hand on the cockpit door, and before opening it, he turns back to her one last time and says the cabin will see who he really is now, not because he asked for it, but because he earned it. And then the door opens, and with it the weight of the moment spills back into the silence of the jet. The pilot steps into the aisle. The passengers turn one by one, surprised to see him outside the cockpit. He walks slowly down the narrow space between the luxury seats, not with urgency, but with purpose. His steps measured, his eyes scanning the faces of those who had watched silently earlier. The janitor is near the service area, now adjusting some supplies, getting ready to return to his corner, out of sight back into the shadows. But then the pilot stops beside him and places a hand gently on his shoulder. The janitor looks up, startled, his expression neutral, but his eyes revealing a flicker of confusion. And then the pilot does something no one expects. He raises his voice just enough for the passengers to hear and says, "This man is the reason every one of you has made it safely to your destinations time and time again." The cabin goes still. Every movement, every sound freezes. Passengers lean forward, unsure if they heard correctly. The pilot continues, speaking slowly, clearly, saying that the man before them had once been the chief maintenance officer for one of the largest airlines in the country with over 30 years of experience, and that without his final safety checks, planes like this would never leave the ground. Gasps ripple through the cabin, not dramatic, not loud, but quiet, surprised, respectful, the kind of gasp that happens when something important is revealed, when something real cuts through the noise and makes people feel something. And now, for the first time, eyes that once looked past him are beginning to see him. The pilot stands beside the janitor, his words still echoing through the cabin, and for the first time the silence feels different, not cold, not awkward, but heavy with meaning. The passengers sit still, not out of fear or confusion, but because they are thinking, remembering, replaying the moments they looked away when the janitor entered the cabin, when he bent down to clean the floor, when they heard the flight attendant speak to him in that tone. A woman near the middle of the cabin lowers her sunglasses slowly, as if seeing the janitor for the first time, really seeing him, her husband. Beside her leans forward, arms on his knees, eyes wide with realization. Another man one row behind shifts, uncomfortably in his seat, looking down at his shoes, ashamed, not because of what he did, but because of what he did not do. The janitor stands quietly next to the pilot, his hands by his sides, his face calm, but his eyes are moist, not with weakness, but with something deeper, the quiet strength of someone who never asked to be noticed, never needed applause. And yet here he stands, being seen by the same people who just moments ago would not have remembered his face. The flight attendant watches from the galley, frozen, her chest rising and falling with short, shallow breaths. She feels something she hasn't felt in a long time, something unfamiliar and unwelcome. Regret, real regret, not the kind that passes in a moment, but the kind that stays, the kind that carves itself into memory. She remembers how she had looked at him, like he was dirt beneath her heels, how she believed she was above him, because her uniform was pressed, and her hair was neat, and people smiled at her when she served champagne. But now no one is smiling at her, and for the first time she understands why. The pilot turns to face the cabin once more, and says something that settles into the bones of every listener. He says the measure of a person is not in what they wear or what title they carry, but in what they do when no one is watching and how they treat those who are easy to ignore. He says the man standing beside him had every reason to walk away from this work, but stayed because he believed in it, because every detail mattered, because lives depended on it. The cabin is quiet, but no longer still. Something has shifted, something permanent. One by one, passengers begin to nod, some even offer quiet words of respect. A thank you, a sorry, a small gesture of recognition. Nothing grand, nothing performative, but real. The janitor does not speak. He does not need to. His silence says more than any speech could. And in that silence, something else happens, the kind of silence that holds dignity, the kind that heals without needing sound. The flight attendant steps forward slowly, unsure, uncertain, and for the first time since she boarded the plane, she does not feel tall. She does not feel powerful. She feels human. The flight attendant stands at the edge of the aisle, her hands slightly trembling, as if her body knows something her pride will not admit. The pilot steps back, giving space, not just to her, but to the moment itself. The janitor still stands quietly in the same spot, his eyes lowered, not in shame, but in quiet patience, as if he has seen moments like this before, and knows that truth always arrives even when it takes its time. The passengers continue watching, not with judgment, not with anger, but with something closer to respect, the kind that does not come quickly, but is earned through silence and stillness and honesty. One woman nods gently at the janitor, as if to say she understands, even as she never spoke up, even as she did nothing before this moment. Now she sees. The flight attendant takes a breath, shallow at first, then deeper, and steps forward one small step, and then another, and with each one she feels lighter and heavier, all at once. Lighter, because the lie of superiority is falling away, heavier, because the truth of her actions sits like a stone in her chest. She stops a few feet from the janitor, her voice caught somewhere between apology and silence. For a moment she looks at him, but he does not meet her eyes, not yet. He is waiting, letting her find her words, not to punish her, but because some moments are too sacred for rushing. She opens her mouth. Once nothing comes, she tries again, this time softer, like wind across a window, barely there. "I did not know," she says, and the words hang in the air, fragile, but real. "I thought I was better. I thought I understood how this world worked. I was wrong." He finally looks up, his eyes tired, but kind, not because he has forgotten, but because he has seen too much in life to hold on to hate. He nods once slowly, not a full forgiveness, but an opening, a doorway to something better. She looks down again, ashamed, but grateful that he gave her even that. The pilot remains quiet, watching this unfold, knowing that sometimes the most powerful lessons are not taught, they are lived. The passengers continue to watch, not as strangers, but as people drawn together by something they did not expect to witness. Dignity not demanded, but lived out loud in quiet work, in silence, in patience. The janitor reaches for his cart and begins to turn away, not as a dismissal, but because there is still work to do, because even after the truth is spoken, the day continues, the flight continues, the jolt continues, and that is what makes him who he is. The flight attendant steps aside, giving him space, her posture different, now more grounded, more aware of the space she takes up, of the people she once overlooked. She watches him move down the aisle, and in his quiet steps she hears a kind of grace she never learned in training. The passengers do not clap. They do not cheer. They simply watch and feel and understand. And in that silence, something beautiful happens. People change. The cabin remains quiet as the janitor walks slowly toward the back, his cart rolling behind him, its wheels making a soft sound that now feels familiar, almost comforting. He does not look back. He does not need to. The moment has passed, and he has given it all he could, not with words, not with gestures, but with presence. And now, like always, he returns to the work that called him here in the first place. The flight attendant stands near the center of the aisle, the weight of what just happened still settling into her bones. She looks around, and sees the faces of the passengers different now, not distracted, not dismissive, but aware, connected as if a thin invisible thread now runs through every row, every seat, every person aboard this aircraft. She exhales slowly, not for show, not for relief, but because it is the first breath she has taken in full awareness in a long time. The captain returns to the cockpit, offering a final glance back at the scene before closing the door behind him. He does not need to say anything more. His message has already been delivered loud enough to echo in the hearts of everyone who heard it. The engines hum softly, and the pilot speaks into the intercom, announcing their final descent, his voice calm and steady, guiding the aircraft, just as he had guided the moment before. The passengers begin to prepare for landing, but there is no rush, no tension, no tapping feet or impatient glances. Instead, there is stillness, and in that stillness, a shared feeling, something between respect and reflection. A woman near the window reaches down to her handbag, pulls out a notepad, and begins to write, not because she has to, but because she needs to remember what she witnessed. An older man leans back, closes his eyes, and smiles, a soft, peaceful smile, like something long forgotten had returned to him. The flight attendant takes one last walk through the cabin, but this time her steps are slower, her gaze softer. When she passes the spot where the janitor had been kneeling earlier, she pauses for just a second, and then moves on, not out of guilt, but out of new understanding. And with that small pause, she leaves behind the version of herself that had walked onto this plane hours earlier. The wheels touch the runway with a gentle thud, and the cabin feels the shift from sky to earth, a return not just to the ground, but to themselves. Passengers begin to gather their things, but they do so differently. Now they move with care, with awareness, as if remembering that the space they share with others, no matter how temporary, still matters. As the doors open and people begin to exit one by one, many glance toward the back. Some nod, some smile, a few whisper thank you as they pass, not loudly, but in a way that says they mean it. The janitor remains by his cart, his expression unchanged, but inside he knows something has shifted, something real, something earned. And as the last passenger steps off the plane and the door closes behind them, the quiet returns, not empty, but full of meaning, full of truth, full of echoes.